Our first speaker is Thibault Imbert. He is from Adobe, Director of Growth. But he's a very inspirational and effective team leader. He's got 8 years in product. Before that, 10 some years in as a developer, as an author, a speaker, a lot of great background that we're going to benefit from. And you'll see he's passionate about solving problems, growing products, and delighting customers. Isn't that a goal for all of us? Well, I'm delighted to hear his talk about qualitative feedback and learning from customers at scale.
I'm the Director of Growth for Creative Cloud. We started this organization almost 2 years ago now. I am very, very interested in, obviously, yes, solving customer problems, and growth is kind of like the intersection of product and marketing. Is anyone in the growth field here? Or yes, some people, okay. It's kind of a new thing, and I have now a team of almost 10 people working on growth. What we do basically is we have product teams that are working with us. So you have Imagine Photoshop or Illustrator or Rush, all these products. And we have satellites, these little, what we call growth squads, that are basically little pods of 4 or 5 people working and optimizing the product to drive growth. It's very interesting because it's a blend of qualitative and data science to really understand customer problems and try to solve them. This is me, and I don't know why I have this slide, because you're like, yeah, I read the previous slide. But what I wanted to say is that before that, I was a product manager on multiple products at Adobe. And before that, when I started at Adobe, I was actually a sales engineer. That's how I kind of like discovered how you actually, the role of sales in companies. I was a developer before that, and I thought that, you know, you don't need marketing, you don't need sales. If you have an awesome product, people will just use it. And well, you guys know it's not true. Okay, agenda. I have around 30 minutes. I have 60 slides. Give me 30 seconds per slide. What we're going to do is go through this. First, it's around, I want to go through why it matters, why qualitative feedback matters. What's the difference between quant and qual. Talk to you about Project White Glove, which is something that now is scaled across the entire company around customer feedback and customer friction, and then how to build one yourself. The CEO of Slack has this. Usually, I was talking to someone who works at Slack, and she was saying when they do product reviews and when it goes badly and there's like a hiccup in the product experience, often Stuart Butterfield says, imagine you're a human, like pause, close your eyes, and imagine you're a human being. And usually it's kind of like, whoa, I'm a human being. Oh, no. Stop drinking the Kool-Aid. Imagine you're a human being and you're in front of this. And what would you do? And this is something that I wrote in an article on Medium called the Customer Empathy Framework. You can Google it, and it's a three-part article that I wrote with growth hackers from Sean Ellis. I really believe, like, as engineers, product managers, like we in the Silicon Valley, we're the worst people to actually understand real human beings, because we're so into the technology that we believe that, oh yeah, it's obvious, you just do that and then the thing shows up, you click here, and then you show it to your friends and it's like it's a disaster. Or you just watch user testing, you look at how customers respond to the experience and you're like, oh my God. So this is why qualitative feedback matters, because this is the life of a growth product manager or product manager. You look at a funnel and you're like, okay, well, this is people landing into the page, they sign up, then they create a project, and that's what you assume that's what people will do. And as we know, this is usually not how it goes. You have people not doing the thing you expect them to do. And the question is, what is happening here, right? You have almost like 50% of people that don't sign up, or 10% of people that will not create a project, which is obviously a key action. Why is that happening? And you can write all the queries of the world. It will never tell you why. So quantitative tells you the what, and this is really something that we live by in our team. Quantitative tells you the what, and qual tells you the why. you'll never be able to understand emotions and frustrations, and this is why it's so important you have even interviews with customers, because you can even see with the body language frustration, like people like me, like, oh, you know, like this doesn't show up in a survey, but like, oh, what, like, and this kind of like reaction to an experience. So this is why it's so important to talk to people and not just collect that information. But what we do at Adobe, we have this project called Follow Me Home. It sounds very creepy, and we didn't brand it that way. It comes from the founder of TurboTax, who started doing user research in parking lots, even more creepy. Follow me home parking lot. But what he did, he would actually just intercept people in supermarket like parkings and just say, hey, I'm very interested in understanding, like, it's tax season. How you're dealing with it, and then can you show me how the process? And he would actually really try to follow people in their environment at home to understand how they're doing this. And we're doing the same thing at Adobe. We have some of our team members in my team flying to specific regions in the US or the world, looking at someone that's installing Lightroom or Photoshop for the first time. And what you see is, again, like if you stay in the Silicon Valley, it's very biased. Go in places of the world where people are less exposed to technology, don't have the same Wi-Fi connection, the speed, and then you'll see what really is happening. So this is why it's so important, because in the product management world, with the rise of growth and all that stuff, it gets very, trendy to talk about data science, quant, and all these insights. But you can't replace interactions with humans to understand what's not working with your product. So let me just walk you through the journey. I was a product manager in Adobe Post. Adobe Post was one of the products I started at Adobe, became later Spark. And when we started Post, we were like a startup inside Adobe. We didn't have a social team. We didn't have any support from execs in terms of like funding for marketing. So we didn't even have someone to do, communications or surveys. As a PM, I had to do everything. I was the person active on social media, actually maintaining and creating the Instagram account and posting every day. And what this allowed me to do is to use social as a bi-directional, as a two-way street conversation to understand customers. But what I wanted to tell you is that this is a story of how I did this from zero with like literally nothing, because people think, oh, you're at Adobe, you have an army of people. But execs at Adobe, when you create a new product, they're like, hey, now you got some engineers, you got some funding, go figure that out and prove us that you have product market fit and that we need to give you more. And I think it's great. And so then we became Spark, and now I'm on growth on Creative Cloud, and it's an $8 billion ARR business. So it's a different scale. But let me show you how we did this in different steps. So qualitative research, understanding customers. The most important thing, I think, is you need to understand two types of users. First, you need to understand your power users and your early adopters. Ultimately, as a product manager, you want to create more power users. Power users are the people that are going to pay you. Power users are the people that are going to talk about your product. Power users is essential to your business. So if you have some power users and early adopters, you want to understand who are they? Where do they come from? What do they like? And we'll talk about the danger of only talking to power users, which leads you to building a product for a niche and then missing all the people that are trying to use it, but you're kind of missing something. So the first thing we did is we started using social media to test product market fit. And Sean Ellis from Growth Hackers has a very interesting framework for that, where you ask your customers, and we created an account on Instagram, we started getting some followers, we linked the account from the product, so we had kind of like a loop here going on. We're growing the account, and to stay in touch with the customers, because we didn't want to use emails, because it's not that emails don't work, but we wanted to kind of have this velocity and this lean aspect on social, having conversations with people. And we were testing product market fit by asking a simple question, which is, how would you feel if you could no longer use the product? And in Sean's framework, I can't recall the percentage, but basically if most of your customers are like, it'd be disappointing, but hey, c'est la vie, That's not good. You want to have most people tell you, oh, it would be pretty bad. I really like the product. So we got some early signals to capture quality feedback. In Instagram, you don't have links, so we actually just had that in the profile. Hey, provide some feedback to the team, link in bio, boom, get some quality feedback. I had a survey up in a few hours, didn't have to need to have a marketing person, and just did it, and we got quality feedback going on. The limitation with that approach is that it was hard to have actually conversations because Instagram is not great for that. And it was very mobile oriented. I didn't get some people on the team were like, I'm not on my mobile phone every day, I'm working and I'm not going to be watching my phone. Some developers would actually be on the desktop, and it was just unnatural. So it was good for the marketing team and the product team, but we didn't get the whole organization embedded in the voice of the customer. I wanted my vice president to actually look at the customer feedback, and later he followed us and but at the beginning we had to kind of like convince people that it was worth looking at, and so we thought we could, for that we would need to get more people to look at it. So I had an idea, and I was like, okay, it's good to capture some people on social and talk to them, but the problem is that we were also talking to what I call ephemeral power users. People follow you, they use the product for a while, but they stop using it, and so we thought we were actually talking to the most engaged customers, but not really. So I was thinking, can we create something like a place that's special to these users and have conversations with them at all time, but understand really if they're active users by looking at their behavior in the product. So we created this initiative called Spark Insider, which is a VIP secret Facebook group that you got access only if you were super active with the product. And we would do randomized selection. We had a controlled group and then a treatment. We did an A/B test. And we elevated some people, power users, to the status of Spark Insider. And what happened is that now we were collecting, we were capturing really users that were super active, the real power users, like very, very active. So what happened is that in the product, if you were active, very active, we would elevate you, if you were lucky, to the VIP golden ticket, VIP Insider. And we started collecting a lot of leads. Almost 1 out of 2 were like, hell yeah, I want to be a Spark Insider. That's super cool. And then we would take them to a landing page where they would give us their basically email. We would email them the details, and then they would get access to the Facebook secret group. The fact that it was a Facebook secret group was also an interesting incentive because it feels very, very special. And in the email that we would send them, it would say, here are the benefits. You're going to get access to the team. You're going to get access to beta. You're going to get swag. You're going to get all these things. And people were like, oh my God. I had people follow me on Messenger, like on my personal Messenger, and like on the weekends be like, hey, where's my access? Like I didn't get access to Spark Insider. It's crazy. I think I have still like a lot of messages that I've been going through. And I was like, wow, people like, and so that was awesome. And today we have almost 4,000 people on the group. We started a year ago, and it's really the more power users, right? So, and I think it's interesting that we're talking about scaling it to different types of user. But what's interesting is that what do people talk about in this group? Well, they showcase their work. Very interesting for the team to understand what type of content people create. And Spark Post is a product that helps you create images for social media. Very relevant. And so, oh, we lost one screen. So very, very useful. And we would get some people to showcase their work. A lot of people also talk about some bugs maybe they would have. Not a lot. We don't have bugs at Adobe. It's not true. So bugs, and then evangelism. Some people talking about the work that they're doing to tell the world about the product. And what's interesting is that now we had this group inside Facebook. Everyone has an account. It's on the desktop. So we would get all the engineers, all the product managers, everyone on the insider group to read the messages. And it was amazing because suddenly we had engineers see bugs and they would respond personally. And then for the customers, like, wow, the guy who's actually, or that's coding this feature, he or she's responding to me, and now I'm really, I feel like I'm very connected to the company, they care, and so from a customer support and brand, it's huge. And then evangelism, and then this would allow us to connect with these people and say, hey, do you like to become an ambassador? And then work with them on marketing. Then quickly we elevated some of the people, the most active on the group as ambassadors, and then they would maintain the group and have conversations. And then as a product manager, I would use this group to recalibrate the team to the reality. I mean, we have all been in meetings where, you know what, like we use words that no one would understand outside of the building. And then you say, what? Like, no, we can't. And then so we would say, how would you describe Spark in one sentence? While we as a marketing team are like drinking the Kool-Aid and be like, yeah, like create visual stories for, people would be like, oh, it's my marketing one-stop shop. Oh, great. And then it would help us to actually use that in our marketing. Understand your early adopters through, like I said, having the engineers kind of like a constant thermometer to how people feel about the product. And so now this is going to be scaled to other products in the company. And so we're really proud of that. Also, more marketing, less like product specific, but we designed socks. Very important to have socks. I'm sure there's some DocuSign socks around. There you go. Marshall is on it. It was, I think, kind of the trend in the past years, right? I got a enameled, I'm French, and initially I remember telling someone on the team, we're going to get an animal animal pin, and she was like, animal? And an enameled pin in Los Angeles, super like nice and cool, and we emailed every single insider on Christmas a box with that swag. And people were like, oh my God, this is super cool. And then one thing that's great is that then we had all these people on the Facebook group, then we were able to also learn more about them. Where do they come from, the age, and that was very interesting to recalibrate with what we think our users were and who they are really. One thing that was not the goal of Spark Insider, but one interesting thing is that we were able to also use these type of profile to optimize our ads so that Facebook could be like, oh, you want more people like this, like power user? Then I'm going to actually look alike, and then we were able to reduce our cost of acquisition, which was kind of cool. I was like, woo, double win, more happy customers, and then we're spending less on acquisition. Okay, so that's for power users, what we did. And we have some more things that we're thinking about. One thing is doing an ambassador program and learning from them in a different way about adoption. But in growth, and I think in product management, but sometimes it's not really done, is understand the non-ideal user. You want to build a product for, like I said, for more power users. You also want to build a product where you understand the journey of a non-ideal user in the funnel so that you can better fix it. We've all talked about onboarding, but what does actually successful onboarding look like in a product? That's a good question. What is successful? And often you'll hear, well, we're going to put a coach mark, and then if people do that, then they'll have, we've all been in these products, right? You launch the product and you've got all these things and you say, skip, 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 thank you. And then later you go back and like, what was that? So what defines success for a user? From the landing page that you build to the MAU, what happens? And this is what we call activation. And now we're getting more into growth, and you'll see what I'm bringing that up for the collection of feedback. So activation, is anyone familiar with this concept of activation? Okay, yes, the people that did Reforge are obviously aware of that. So Reforge.com, I don't work for them. Everyone on my team is taking the Reforge class. And Reforge is a workshop for growth practitioners, mostly product managers who want to do growth. It's very good. So you should check it out. And the concept of activation is simple. You've got 3 metrics. One is setup, the aha, and the habit, right? So if you think about the journey of your users, the thing that they have to do in the product initially, the first thing they got to do is import. For us at Adobe or DocuSign, it's probably, depending on the product, but I know only the signature product, is probably import a PDF or open a PDF. If people don't do that, they're not going to get to the value of the product. So what is the first setup? As you can imagine, all of our products at Adobe, you need to import something. Import an image, import a video, and then you work on it. This is what our tools do. The aha is where qualitative research comes in, where you spend time with customers understanding what was the thing that really got you to love the product. You can hear it in user research, if you use user testing or whatever, where people are like, oh my God, this is so cool. Or, oh wow, this is great. And you can feel it. You can hear it, and you can also hear it the other way around, when people are like, oh my God, this is horrible. The life of product management. And then habit is when the user has established a core, has established the habit around using the product. Let me ask you a question. What do you think is the metric for habit in most of our products at Adobe? They're almost the same for all. What is the thing, what is the action where, as a product manager, if you see this action going on all the time for your users, you know that your business is doing good? Any ideas? Sorry? No, so NPS, we'll talk about that, because NPS is more like a score that you're giving, but think about the action that people are taking in your product. Yeah, so opening the application is more like upstream. If you think about the way most companies think about it, whether it's like a WhatsApp or Airbnb, it's always about the core thing. At Airbnb, it's bookings. WhatsApp, it's number of messages sent by user. For us, it's around exporting something from the product, right? Some teams, it's more subtle, it's more like editing. But if you are an Adobe customer and then you're never exporting something from our products, well, there's something wrong. We should talk to you. So habit is very important. So how do you find these metrics? Well, you do qualitative and quantitative. You use machine learning to do validation and invalidation through correlation analysis. So basically, you look at all the people that are successful in your product. You look at all the people that are not successful, that have churned, and you try to find the differences. But the step one is you start with product manager hypothesis by talking to customers. And you hear from customers what they'll tell you. Oh, this is really great. That is the feature that for me was I realized the value. And activation is so important because it lifts all boats. It will lift NPS, it will lift retention, conversion to paid, because it is the first impression that people have on your product. You have to nail onboarding and activation. Otherwise, people will be gone, forget about your product. It's really hard to get them back. So this is why activation is so important. And what we did is, for all the products at Adobe, we look at what we like to call a North Star metric, which is, let's say, monthly active editors, which shows what's the percentage of the repeat mail that are editing. And we look at the frequency, and we set that as a kind of like natural frequency for each segment. If you're a pro, you're probably more active than a hobbyist. If you start notifying a hobbyist because they're not doing enough and you don't think they're doing 50 edits in first 28 days, that person might be like, stop spamming me. I love your product. Chill. I'm just on vacation. We got a lot of that. And so we learned. And so what you do, you work your way back to discover the activation metrics. You look at the habit. Okay, what is the moment of activation for Lightroom? We discover that it's around the number of 10 edits in the first 28 days. The first color correction in the first 7 days is the aha, and then importing a photo on day one is the setup. And if you think about it, so we did the work, and I think now it's more refined. I need to update it with the latest findings, but it makes sense. You need to import a photo. If you don't import a photo, something's wrong. you need to do color correction or some kind of like valuable edits, and then you need to keep editing. It's very important to think about the habit because when I was a product manager on the product, I thought that successful onboarding was getting someone to a series of steps and then use the product for the first time. But we all know that this is not forming a habit. If I tell you do 10 pull-ups, push-ups, or whatever now, and you do it, doesn't mean you're forming a habit around a healthy lifestyle. But if you're doing it every day or every 2 days for a month, we can start talking about a habit. And now probably you're more likely to have a healthier lifestyle. So because we had these actions that define success, we created a project called Project White Glove. It came from, I love Japan, and I don't know if you know, in Japan, the cab drivers have white gloves, and I think it's super cool. Feels very like you're like a king or something. Very fancy, and with a friend of mine, we were talking. We're just like the idea of just providing that first kind of like red carpet white glove experience for our customers. And we said, hey, what if when people are not performing these actions, we reach out to them and understand why? So what we did is we created a system where when people are not going through these specific steps, and what we do, we have a system so that we don't email the person for, if we've emailed someone for the aha, we're not going to email her for setup or habit. Otherwise, it would be a little bit spammy. But we kind of sample and we say, hey, we've noticed you haven't imported a photo in the past day or 2 days in Lightroom. Can we help? And a lot of people will respond to that. And what we do is we have 3 components for this. We send an email. In the email, we say, we would love to know why. Maybe we can talk. Can you give us your email? No. We email them. Obviously, we have their email. People click, and then they can send their feedback on the landing page. And that is captured and sent to Slack. And the reason why we're using Slack, so remember, we use social, then we went to Facebook, which is great for another purpose. And now we're using Slack in parallel, not for the power users, but for the non-ideal users. And what we do is that we're using Adobe Campaign for sending the emails, we're using Unbounce for the landing page, and then we powered all that through Zapier to connect everything. Zapier, amazing. Anyone using it? Yeah, it's great. Zapier allows you to connect basically any tool to another tool without engineers, which is amazing. And what happens is that we then have this feedback coming in every minute on Slack. So each product team has a Slack channel where they can see a bot. And this is the feedback from a customer. This is real feedback from a Photoshop customer who hasn't launched. You can see no launch trials. That means it's a trial. It's a user on trial that hasn't launched the product. I need to download again and reinstall the Photoshop. Would like to try new. What stopped you when I tried to launch? It didn't start. Okay, well, that's not good. We need to follow up. This is another one. The XD team wanted to ask specific questions. How was your initial experience? Do you plan to continue? What is your primary work function? So you can use that as a calibration, as more like a survey, and any other feedback, and so on. And the beauty of Slack is that we then have a system for flagging. So we can actually flag specific, we have a wiki where we have all kinds of emojis for the follow-up that's required. So we have now a lot of people on the Slack channel, and every time a product manager reaches out to the customer to provide support, learn more, we flag it. That means Olivia has been called by someone from the team to understand what we can do better so that she can export something from Rush, which is a new product that we have. Scott Bielski, who is our Chief Product Officer, is active on the Slack channel, where there was a customer saying who wanted to provide some feedback, some improvements in Cloud Docs, and Scott Bielski was like, hey, pinging the engineering manager for Cloud Docs, hey, have we taken in account this feedback for improving this feature? boom, and then in a few minutes, conversation and people are talking. So now we have over 450 people internally watching feedback coming in. Instant conversations allowed with threads, and Slack is front of mind, so the voice of the customer has now penetrated the entire organization. And that's so cool. Like, it's so awesome when we see the team responding and reading. And product managers told me the other day, I was talking to some of them in a group, and they were like, oh, I look at the Slack channel every morning. I go to work, I commute, I'm looking at all the feedback. And again, it's recalibration with the reality when you're a product manager to read from the customers that are not successful using your product. So the problem with Slack, just by Slack by definition, it's that, I spend too much time in Slack. This is a problem that Slack is having, I think, is that it's actually becoming counterproductive in some ways. And it's a great product, but a lot of PMs were like, listen, I already have 600 channels on Slack that I need to read. There's now a new one with like a new piece of feedback every minute. Like, I can't do that. Like, you got to give me a better, or like something that's easier for me to parse. So we have a team, and we thought, oh, can we use machine learning for this? So we added 2 more components, where now we have a machine learning engine that looks at all the feedback, does natural language processing, and groups everything into a dashboard on Power BI. And so what that looks like is that we have for each product a dashboard where we understand if the feedback is around motivation, overall experience, or usability and bugs. And we group then the feedback by themes. So this is for motivation. You can have people confused giving some feedback about the managing and the editing. Some people giving some feedback about the fact that they're happy or the fact that they need time to learn. And here it's usability and bugs, and usually it's more segmented for usability and bugs and general problems, confused with the naming. We have a product that's called Lightroom Classic and CC. Some people are confused, need help, missing features. All these things are things that a product manager can go to and have a summary of the themes, and that's great. You can put it in a slide when you're working with the engineering team and say, this is the trend this week. And what we also have is we have segmentation based on the activation stages. So you can say, give me all the feedback from people that have never imported, which is the setup in Lightroom, and you're going to get that segmentation, and you'll see feedback like, I tried to do this, but I didn't understand, or fascinating, sometimes localization, and people don't understand an option. So we have 5 products today using this engine. We're going to add more products. We're going to have more segmentation, and we're going to also maybe do automated email reports on trends. That would be great, so that you can see that feedback coming in and report so people can see it within the company. That's what I wanted to show you and how we've been doing this in some examples and with this little project, White Glove, to scale it. When I talk to product leaders outside of Adobe, it's this concept of voice of the customer penetrating the organization is something very important. We talk about NPS, which is, NPS is, as most of you know, is a Net Promoter Score. And it's kind of like NPS on steroids because it's very connected to the actions. But NPS collects feedback in a more kind of like blended way. And so this allows us to be very specific around the action that's preventing people from being successful with the product. If you have any questions, maybe we have time for Q&A. I'm going to be here, and I can take happy to discuss more. Yes?
Quick question. In the earlier incarnation of your Slack channel, you have a two-way communication. You can drill down a little bit, but it doesn't scale. When you go to the automated segmentation, you are able to handle the workflow.
Right.
You lose that two-way channel.
Yeah.
And you lose the depth. So how do you?
So it's a great.
You have a Slack newsletter.
Because that's not being recorded.
Yeah. The question is a great question. Is you were saying it's great with Slack. You've got this bidirectional conversation. With the dashboard, you kind of lose that. And absolutely, what we found so far is that how do you have the two? Well, so far we haven't found the solution for that. what we've seen is a lot of the, it depends on the people. Some product managers will actually go to the Slack channel all the time and go through it, mostly for the products that are with less volume. And some product managers will look at the dashboard and have the customer support team on Slack to actually exchange and have conversations. So it's a good question, because what we've seen is that it depends on the type of people and team, what they prefer using. And so with these two solutions, we cover pretty much all the different types of people and how do they want to look at this feedback. This dashboard is also very useful for executives to report on trends, because it's impossible to do that on Slack, to extract themes and categories out of that.
I'm wondering, how do you do quantitative research on your qualitative feedback? For example, it's obviously great to have all the voices of customer, but with all this information pouring every day, exposed to all the product manager, so how do you figure out, how do you prioritize basically after all your segmentation? So which one is most important, instead of one product manager just saying, hey, I see this message, see this trend, another person say another thing?
It's a good question. The question is, with quantitative, how do you prioritize what you want to look into? Right now, what I've seen is product managers have been using this mostly to look at the things that are really, really critical. So they look at the feedback, and as a product manager, you look at this thing every day, it gets some wheels spinning. You're like, oh, this thing, it's not really I know it's not great, it's not a showstopper, but I'm going to make a note, something we should look into in the next sprint. What I've seen is often when we ship a new feature, or when there's something that the product team believes there needs to be a follow-up because people have some feedback, it shows up on these channels, it validates these things or not, and often the product managers would follow up directly on these things that match with some of the things that they already have some level of instinct that it's a problem. And what it allows them to do is to connect with individuals who have this specific issue and have conversation with them to understand how to improve it. I wish we could do something to the next level where it would provide some form of suggestions on what is the most critical thing, and probably we could do that based on language processing, but there's always, the business priorities and then where the product is. So that's where the art of product management comes in, where you look at this and you're like, yeah, I know a lot of people talk about this, it's not great, but this is actually more critical, so we're going to look at this first. There's no perfect answer to that. It's kind of like, no, it's not a perfect science, that's the art of product management.
I saw your system, and it's very reminiscent of I think how some items have looked at some customer support tickets.
Yep.
Do you apply the same machine learning, natural language processing to all the customer support tickets that are coming in?
Mm-hmm.
Do you also aggregate both this stuff and the customer support to generate aggregated customer insights?
No, and that's a problem. We created this out of our kind of growth lab very quickly, and now what happened, to have the full story, the customer support team is now helping us. Initially, we got so much volume, and you cannot have all this feedback and not respond to people. Right? Some product managers came to us and like, hey, you have this thing going where you're emailing people. Do you have enough people to actually follow up with people that are really unhappy? And we realized that no. So we teamed up with the customer support team. And they are now on the Slack channel, and they actually look at this feedback and help us. It depends on the type of problem. If it's a technical problem, sometimes it will be customer support or billing. When it's more of a feedback about a feature, it will be more user research. A PM will reach out, or a product designer. But we don't have a way to connect the two yet. And so that's something that we've been talking about, is how to make sure that this feedback, there's solutions like Zendesk and other solutions, how do we aggregate the two? But we haven't done that yet.
So what I understood was in the context of Adobe, activation means when the user has developed the habit.
Yeah.
Right? And can you maybe just take an example of one particular product and talk about,
Yeah.
What are some of the things that tactically work for you in helping users build that habit?
Yep.
From signing up for the first time.
Yeah. So the question is around activation and this concept of habit formation. How do we give a concrete example? So the example that I gave for Lightroom, so for pretty much all of our products, and let's take Lightroom, it's about importing a photo. And like I said, we do discover these things by doing correlation analysis. We look at the data, quantitative and qual, and then we make a call. The setup is import. The aha is using some specific features. And now I simplified it on the slide, but it's actually a little bit different based on the type of user, right? If you're a hobbyist, it's a little bit different than a pro. So we have that, but we basically, let's, for the sake of simplicity, say auto tune, which is an option. So that would be the aha, and the habit is using a specific action multiple times across multiple days to show that you're actually forming that habit. And the things that you want to do to drive that habit formation in the first 28 days, and the reason why we take 28 days is because most of our products are not consumer products, some of them are. You cannot form a habit around using Photoshop in a day, right? Like, we would be a $100 trillion business. But Photoshop, it takes multiple days. And so for most of our products, it takes a few weeks. So we said, if we get someone to activate, and we move the activation up after 28 days by 5 points, and the user is still doing that after 4 weeks, it's great. The user is more likely to be successful. And the thing you want to do to drive that habit formation is to have changes in the product and behavioral notifications or basically responses and triggers, whether it's email notifications or in product, to drive that habit formation. So what we do is if you haven't imported a photo, then we will email you or send a push notification, say, hey, you haven't imported your album, why don't you create one? Get people back into the product. So that's what you want to do. You want to leverage generally the product, notifications, and also customer support. This is why Intercom is so popular. Intercom can be used, it's like a little chat. Does anyone know Intercom? Okay, so Intercom is like a chat pod. I don't think they'd like me to say this, but it's a marketing platform through chat, and it allows you to connect specific events, and then based on the actions that people make in the product, you can respond and say, hey, glad you're using this feature. Did you know you could do that? And it's like a very powerful messaging platform for marketing and customer support. Does that make sense as an answer? Okay.
Last question. Might be a multi-part. Quick one. Okay. You mentioned earlier that you guys have growth pods. Your team breaks up into growth pods, and they're attached to different products.
Yep.
I was wondering what those growth pod teams are comprised of, and how they interact with the PM of the actual product.
Great question. So.
What's the second part of your question? The first question here is.
Okay, yeah, the first question is around the composition of the growth pods or squads. Like I said at the beginning of the presentation, we have growth pods that they are like mini teams attached as satellites to the product teams. What's the composition? So we have a product manager from my organization. We have a product designer, a growth designer. We have some engineers, ideally multiple. We have a user researcher. We have a lifecycle marketer. And we have, what am I missing? And I think that's pretty much it. And that's the composition. And by having all these people, you cover all the different areas of growth by understanding customers, being able to communicate with them, making changes in the product, and so on. And that's how we work. And that's the one I was forgetting about. The last piece of the puzzle in the growth squad is the product manager of the product. right? So you cannot have a team that's working in parallel and making changes in the product without having the PM of the product being aware, because that's obviously very important from a backlog standpoint or what you need to be prioritized in the product. And so what we did is we partnered. Every time we have a squad, there's always a PM from the product team as an extension of that knows what's happening from a growth standpoint and helps us prioritize things.